Oh, that makes sense.
And so used to the patriarchy, you don't even
Yeah.
see it.
See, that's it. Oh my God, I look at that. Yeah.
So how can you manifest as an ego except through the patriarchy conditions that you are female, and a female is here to serve as a servant to the happiness and success of the male aspect.
Yeah. Okay.
And that the sacred is not empowered as the feminine, but as the male aspect. And the sacred is actually seen as the delusion or Maya force. So your own sense of yourself as an empowered sacred being is not given any recognition in the culture you're living. In fact, the opposite, the suppression of all of it, and another philosophy has been given to you to follow and believe. That's where you are going to find or be happy. In a spiritual community has these elements, the patriarchy, that if the women want to be able to practice and go deeper and empower themselves as the sacred, they have to overcome the limits and boundaries that the patriarchy and the religious teaching and the spiritual teaching has been given through that vehicle. Many religions, the women can't be the priest. They only can be nuns. And in many religions, the women aren't given the deeper teachings. They only can have the outer teachings. So not only is that not empowerment as the feminine, as the sacred, how are you going to realize it in your own form as the sacred? Because you're in the feminine form. So you're given this big philosophy that says the opposite for you. So even though you might have a spiritual impulse, you have all the philosophy and teaching and the culture itself holding you in place to be a servant to the man who's going to realize the sacred, or be the sacred, or teach the sacred. In our generation, generations after, there's always been a struggle with this.
Yes.
If you notice that all the laws about women's bodies and what they can do with them, and as far as the reproductive field, where's all the laws around for the men and what they can do and not do? Yeah. We're just so used to being oppressed. We just think it's the way things are and what we have to overcome. We have to deal with some of that to overcome some of that limit, but the whole thing is just a false philosophy. It's not based on anything true. The biggest way to overcome something that's false is not to believe in it. And that's the fastest and easiest way to overcome something. Not to fight it to the extent that you get to feel a little less oppressed.
Right. That's a big difference.
Just not to believe in it altogether. She's going somewhere. Any more questions about that?
That's really, what you just said too is really helpful.
It's a very
Just
serious
not to
matter
believe
that's
it.
never been addressed.
That's what I feel.
That everything's tainted by this. How did it get started? Who knows? Why it got started? Who knows? But we're in it. And we're also in that people are beginning to suspect it through my life and work, my influence. Because if one person doesn't agree with it or doesn't see it as a real way or real teaching or real life for the feminine to realize its own empowerment, then there's the crack.
Yeah.
One crack is all it takes. So if it rings true for you, because of my understanding, my recognizing it, then it will ring true more and more everywhere. And it's not something that men are opposed to, because men are oppressed by the same system. And if they have a genuine impulse towards realizing the sacred, they have to integrate their own empowerment, the feminine aspect with their masculine aspect. The masculine aspect has just been used to pretty much dominate everything for the reasons of sustainability. The argument that we have to do it this way to be sustained. Whereas actually created all the problems that ever existed.
Right.
And the only ideas that have ever been given is the ideas of the patriarchy as a means to be happy and sustain themselves satisfactorily. That's the only ideas you've been exposed to, because that's been around you. You don't have to get up the mountain of the hierarchy, the mountain of the patriarchy, to be yourself or to be free. You just have to not believe in it and act accordingly. Whenever you have wisdom, you never act on false wisdom again. True wisdom will always show you the deepening of who you are. So instead of having a projected identity of wife, mother, or trying to have a role, a true, authentic role as the feminine in this world, instead of trying all that, you actually don't try. So if you don't try and you stand on the truth, everything will adapt to you. That's how powerful the truth is.
Yes, yeah, that's really amazing.
All this is a false ego, false based on patriarchy, but it's all false ego. It's a projected identity. You've been told what your identity can be and what should be, and it's for your own good and for your own fulfillment. But none of those ideas are actually true if you inspect any of them. So even in spiritual communities, they have problems with the male figure or guru figure taking advantage of his power dynamic to actually have a good time with women's affection and energy and attention. And they are willing to give it to them like willing to give their sons or husbands or their bosses, just to be able to hopefully project a truer identity and a more fulfilled identity. But it won't work that way. It'll never work that way. So it's good that women have gotten more opportunities, and that needed to happen and should continue to happen and must happen. You know, just for sanity of this place we're living in, and to bring down some of the most suppressive and undignified aspects of power dynamic relationships, or the ego I is the patriarchy right now. With the spirit of cooperation is the aspect of the feminine, you know, both human and divine, that needs to come. It needs to be present now. It needs to be what manifests now, not the idea of the other is separate in fear, or the powerful over the poor and you know, lowly so-called. We must share everything, you know, and that must happen. So, any more questions about that? Or?
It's really helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's why I started teaching with Woman Warrior.
Yeah,
and that when we looked at all the beliefs that we felt oppressed by in the culture, that's why I started there, instead of let's just talk about you know, enlightenment and the obstruction to your own enlightenment, or the way or the practice of enlightenment. We started there with those beliefs, to look at those beliefs. And you're the next generation, she's the younger generation. Those beliefs are still all in place, right? You still encounter them. And whenever you believe them or go along with them, your own sense of your own empowerment and capacity diminishes to be your authentic self, diminishes. Yeah. You can become yeah, right? Any other questions about that? No? So the world, and you know, this has to be understood now.
Yeah.
And so people can choose not to choose it anymore. So if it's just the way things are, and that's the game you get to play, and everybody wants to win at that game, you never see that the game itself is fixed.
Yeah.
And it's rigged. Yeah. So it's rigged. Yeah.
Just a lie.
Yeah. It's not true. But you get somebody to believe something that's true, you know. It's real to them at that point.
Yeah.
But if they can see that it's not really valid, it's not really true, then you can't get them to do anything to compromise or agree with or follow that belief. So if women didn't want to be part of any choice that didn't really honor and recognize their own opportunity to realize the self, or not be put in positions of being servants to the other spiritual male aspects, well, how would any of these communities thrive or endure at all? It's counting on the servant, that women are willing to be the servant class, instead of where everyone cooperates and does their part. Yeah. You know, the whole, in the early 70s or 60s, the women's movement, like, how could you work and have a family? Oh my God, it's so amazingly difficult. And you have to feel guilty if you're working. Or you have to feel unfulfilled if you can't work outside the home and have any opportunities. So that's a big dilemma. Isn't all that an absurd dilemma that's only been created by the patriarchy?
Yes.
That everybody's talents and opportunities and capacities should be fully realized instead of one sacrificed for another.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody has to sacrifice anything they don't want to sacrifice if everyone's cooperating. Everyone does their share, then no one has to give up something and say, well, what if? Because sometimes the thing you give up, as in the feminine aspect, might be something that could really prove quite beneficial for everybody. So the opportunity you had when you were coming up is either go to college and get a husband and raise a family. And that was it. That was your happiness.
I'd argue to go to college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had to fight for it.
I did.
Yeah. And everybody believed that. And then once you were married and had a family and raised kids, you said, well, this is just this. But not only it was just this, the lack of cooperation for the male aspect of the family was kind of humiliating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where the men weren't contributing and cooperating with the
Exactly.
structure. Yeah, well, men are more interested in being emotionally and physically available to their children, but your generation, they weren't. If they did, that was a rare thing. Yeah. So some things are changing, and they should keep changing. Better and faster, right, Emily?
Yeah. Shit.
But you've seen all these things in place already, even though
Friends
she's...
my age.
Yeah, even though she's a couple of generations down the way now. More opportunities, but some of the psychology of the patriarchy is very much still inflicted on what women can do, you know, what they have to overcome to do anything. Instead of knowing that whatever talents and capacities they have and whatever is happening in their relatable field, that whoever they're with, it's all shared and cooperated with, instead of doled out in exclusive roles. All right, so yeah, so the ego is being played out in the patriarchy game. Well, you know, recently I heard different news stories, and they're really pathetic, aren't they? And so nowadays, if you have a contract and you get fired for being doing something illegal or gross, you will still get whatever your contract says as severance. How can this is a corrupt society.
Yes.
This is a corrupt society when you can break the law, hurt people, and still walk away with a whole bunch of money because your contract says. So law is not protecting people at all. It's just protecting the rich and already powerful. That's the patriarchy. That's how, you know, misguided patriarchy is working. And that everybody sees as normal and okay. That's the brainwashing. To do spiritual path, there has to be some capacity to project onto being a spiritual aspirant who's going to wake up.
Yes.
You know, at a certain point, you know, you have to have confidence in your love for the sacred. You know, that it can manifest as realization. But in the patriarchy, all it will manifest as you get to be more and more a servant. That's all the opportunity you have. We're in a very strict caste system in the United States. We act like there's no caste system. We're in a
like
very
that, too.
difficult patriarchy where people can make contracts, make laws, and they're unjust, and they get rewarded
Yeah.
if they disobey the law. That's what we're living as, very corrupt. And everybody's like, just used to it. We're just used to it. So like that, you're just used to the patriarchy in that your sense of yourself or your sense of being able to project a happy self is all seen through the opportunities that the patriarchy lets you have. So that's where it's at, and it's not all that shocking. I think
No, it isn't
everybody.
shocking.
No, I mean, if you're a good man, you've been affected by this. Your heart's been crushed in this kind of corruption, this kind of ego projection, and kind of game of power dynamics been played on you just as hard. You know, it's not like it's, but we've been, you know, particularly a servant class in this. The same way the black race has been a slave in this, cast in that terrible role. You know. We've been cast in the servant role as women. So it makes sense how I started, right?
It's
I
amazing.
said,
Yeah, it's amazing.
why did I come and have to talk to you about what are your beliefs? What beliefs do you have as a woman? And are they actually beneficial to you?
Yeah.
Or are they creating a kind of schism in you? Or they're creating an identity you're unhappy with? What are they? And when we looked at them, it was all based on what we were allowed to think and feel about ourselves.
exactly.
And what we were allowed to feel about our own sexuality.
Yeah.
Our sexuality has been defined by partners,
Yeah.
not by ourselves. So we only understand our sexuality through what the partners have allowed us to have. So we have not generated our own sexuality and thought about it in our own terms. And that's why a lot of men in power dynamic relationships can take advantage of women, because they don't feel empowered, that their sexuality is their own. It doesn't belong to anybody but themselves. So we had to go over a lot of
Yes.
beginning belief systems to see
Yes.
that.
Oh, yeah. 'Cause
You know? Yeah.
that
Well, that's
was-
why women fake it, because they don't fake orgasms, because they don't believe in their own empowerment of their own sexuality, that it belongs to them. They feel it belongs to whoever they're going to encounter and how that's going to take place. So they're going to fake it till they make it. Yeah, so it is full circle now.
Yeah, this
and
is-
we've lived out
yeah.
many years to seeing how this is lived
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
You know, and all the power struggles and all, you know, some of the opportunities that have been struggled with and have come along. There's still, the patriarchy is still very much here,
Yes.
deciding what your opportunity is.
Yes.
So even if you struggle for an opportunity, you have to struggle, you're suppressed. It's not because opportunity is all obviously there and everybody's cooperating with serving that opportunity. An opportunity we have now is for everyone to see each other as a true human being.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be equal to. We're all sharing everything. So the sense of equality means that something had a bit more powerful dynamic, and now you're trying to be equal to that.
Yes. Yes.
There is no equality. There's all just shared dynamic.
That feels so beautiful and so right.
Yeah. Well, see, the struggle for equality is
Yeah.
acknowledging that the other side is the power dynamic of which we're trying to adapt and fit in and be part of,
Right.
instead of it's not. We're creating a new world where we're all sharing, we're all cooperative. There's no power dynamic.
So beautiful.
There's no
Yeah.
struggle to get
Awesome.
equal.
Yes.
No classes.
No classes.
Oh, right.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
You sound like John Trudell.
Yeah. Okay, John. It's still around. You have to break all the beliefs to be free. And what's the biggest belief?
Separate one.
Separate one.
They're trying to get fulfilled.
But the separate one is based on power dynamic. There's a separate one that wants to be a winner. And therefore there's another that has to be the loser.
That's right.
So in a real understanding of, you know, the unifying field of love, we're all unified, we're all cooperating. In the sense of equality, there's still, that idea still structures on power dynamic.
Yes.
But in what I talk about, the unifying field of love, that we all have to be located as a unification and share the heart. And when you're sharing the heart, everyone wants to give and cooperate with what they can give and cooperate, and they want their talents and capacity to be truly authentic, to be encouraged in everyone. Our society doesn't encourage anyone to be free, already happy, to be the sacred,
No, it
to
doesn't.
realize the self. It doesn't encourage anyone. In fact, anyone in this room has felt not just the usual oppression in the power dynamic world, but the religious and spiritual oppression is even greater. Yeah.
I'm just tired.
I'm tired.
Oh.
We're doing this so you can have a different life too.
Yes.
Yes.
But it's not a fight, see?
Yeah,
It's
no,
the ability
it's
to be happy now, to love now. Say not interested into power dynamic frenzies and dilemmas and freakouts and compromises. You don't have to compromise nothing.
That's so beautiful.
It is, and it really is. But whatever you have to go through to know that you can live this. See, at the core of it, you've been believed that we can't have this.
Right.
We can't live this. We can't know this. We can't be this. There's so much crap we have to get through with so much oppression and difficulty. No, there isn't. It's just a belief system. But you can start right now. You don't live in the world where everything that's terrible news you hear every day, you don't actually have that life. What is your life? And most people, if you examine your life, you don't have that life either. But we all assume whatever's the worst about everything is our burden in our life, and it's not our burden in our life. Every day we can get up and live this understanding. We don't have to try to get there through all this terrible oppression. We just have to know we can live it in the life we are having. So a real political activist who understands this, lives this dynamic so truly, so passionately, that it affects everything.
Right.
And it ripples out to all the other aspects of, what's crummy, what's government, what's corruption. It will, but it has to start here, somewhere, with someone. So I'm here, and I'm starting it with me. Yeah. And that's it. And that's,
Such a miracle.
Mind blowing.
I dream big, but I'm also awake.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not just dreaming a dream. I'm empowering and understanding.
It's lit alive.
So if you're tired of a certain kind of dream, I'm empowering the new understanding. That's what I'm doing. All right. I said it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.